Straight ahead, eclipse excitement. Why a North Texas county has issued a disaster declaration ahead of tomorrow's total solar eclipse and what it means for residents, businesses, and visitors. Order in the court. Texas and the Biden administration try to convince the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals whether the state's new immigration law violates the Constitution. How each side tries to use uncertainty over the law to their advantage. And one-on-one, Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey discusses the situation at the border, help for Ukraine, and the Israel-Hamas war. Good Sunday morning. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics. Hope you're having a great weekend. And we begin with the excitement over the total solar eclipse. Are you ready for tomorrow's historic event of a lifetime? I know I am. I've got my glasses. I'm all set. And as you know, a good part of the state, including North Texas, is in what's called the path of totality. This means, weather permitting, we will get to see the moon completely block the sun. It's set to begin around 1:30 p.m. Central Time in South Texas and last up to 4 minutes, 26 seconds. The sky will darken as if it were dawn or dusk. The website, greatamericaneclipse.com, says the total solar eclipse enters Texas from Eagle Pass and Del Rio, and it continues on a northeasterly track through Fredericksburg, San Antonio, Austin, and Waco, right through the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Totality will start around 1:39 p.m. here. It leaves Texas through Paris and Texarkana and heads into Oklahoma and Arkansas. The Texas Comptroller's Office says 12.8 million Texans live in the path of totality, and that as many as 1.1 million people are expected to visit our state to watch the eclipse. Now, to prepare for this, the state tells us that 16 cities and counties in Texas have issued disaster declarations, and they include 2 counties in our area, Zandt and Kaufman. And we asked Kaufman County Commissioner's Court Judge Jakie Allen why he ordered it and what this means for residents, businesses, and visitors.
With the influx of possibly 200,000 people coming to our county, that's our population now. So we seem to be having maybe a gridlock. By doing that, if we need state resources, then we have the ability to ask for that through the governor's office for DPS. They also have a mobile cell unit, so if our cell phones get so bombarded, we have extra help there too.
And what is your biggest concern?
Traffic congestion, safety, and health of those of our own citizens, plus those who are coming. All of our law enforcement officers have to be on duty. Don't want to be off that day. And we've asked our citizens, if they can, to stay home or go to the events. Like here in Kaufman, the city has a park, and they have a lot of events happening that day. So we want them to be there. We hope that the residents will buy all their groceries and their gas beforehand. With the visitors coming in, all of the gas stations, we've asked them to have their tanks full. The grocery stores have stocking up early. So we've asked CareFly to bring in extra ambulances, and they have. We're also bringing one of their helicopters who will either be at the Terrell Airport or at our hospital here in Kaufman.
And just because most counties in North Texas did not issue disaster declarations doesn't mean they didn't plan. Take Johnson County, for example. Leaders there have placed more ambulances on call, and all first responders are working. CBS News Texas is getting you ready for the total solar eclipse. Our team is covering this special event from all angles and all corners of the state. Join us for Into the Darkness, a Texas total eclipse, a live drone show. That's tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. And now let's take a look at some other headlines across Texas. A Texas resident has come down with avian flu after coming into contact with cattle that have been infected with the virus. Health officials say the person doesn't have a serious case and that the only symptom is pink eye. This is only the second time in the U.S. a person has come down with avian flu. Dairy cattle in Texas and 2 other states have come down with the virus. Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller says there's no danger to the milk supply.
Consumers need to know that none of the milk entered the food chain. Wouldn't have mattered anyway because we pasteurize milk, which kills all the pathogens, and we haven't destroyed enough milk to make a dent in the milk supply, so the prices of dairy products should remain stable.
The head of the Texas Division of Emergency Management told Texas lawmakers last week the state should set up its own Air Force to battle wildfires. TDEM Chief Nim Kidd testified at state legislative hearings following the state's largest wildfire in history. 2 people died. Chief Kidd said it would cost about $50 million to buy and operate up to 6 aircraft to fight fires. During the hearing, fire chiefs and other first responders sharply criticized the state's response to the wildfires. Dallas area highways will be getting a little more community friendly, and the feds are helping to pay for it. The U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg came to Dallas Thursday with an $80 million federal grant. That will help fund pedestrian caps or deck parks over a variety of Dallas area highways. This is a digital rendering of the deck park at the Southern Gateway along I-35. Other deck parks will be over I-30 in East Dallas, plus an extension of the existing deck park over Clyde Warren Park in downtown Dallas, and another along State Highway 5 in McKinney.
These projects matter because they reconnect where there's been division in the past. Highways are very good at quickly moving vehicles through an area, but they can also cut off one half of that area from the other. These neighborhoods need better connections.
And a follow-up now about the organization No Labels and its effort to field a presidential ticket this year. The movement announced that it has ended that plan after it wasn't able to find candidates who had a credible path of winning the White House. There is still some uncertainty over the controversial new Texas immigration law, SB 4. Coming up, how each side of the debate tried to use the uncertainty to their advantage in front of a U.S. appeals court. And later, we go one-on-one with Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth about border security, help for Ukraine, and the Israel-Hamas war. Eye on Politics. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Order in the court. On Wednesday, a 3-judge panel at the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard more arguments about whether the state's new controversial immigration law, SB 4, is constitutional. The judges already stayed the law, keeping it from going into effect. Texas argued its legislation will help uphold the existing federal law, while the Biden administration said SB 4 interferes with the federal government's sole jurisdiction over immigration. Under the legislation, it's a state crime for a migrant to cross into Texas illegally. It would allow state judges to order a migrant to be returned to their home country after they serve time in jail, or if the migrant agrees to it before being prosecuted. There's also uncertainty over how the state's law would work in some circumstances. We spoke with Dallas appellate attorney David Cole, who's not involved in this case, and he said one judge who previously sided with Texas indicated he felt it's too early for the feds to block the state's law.
Federal law actively in conflict with anything in the state law. And since we haven't put the law into effect yet, and there are a lot of questions about what exactly Texas is going to do, we don't know if there are going to be any conflicts yet. It's too early to act. So he sees the lack of operational history, a lack of some clarity on these issues as a reason not to intervene at this stage.
Cole said 2 judges who have previously sided with the Biden administration asked questions indicating they disagree with the state's argument.
Why should we let you do this when the federal government already has a policy? We may not like the federal policy, but we at least need to know what your alternative is. And those have been difficult questions for the Solicitor General to answer.
So what's next? The 3 judges could rule on this case as early as next week. It could then go to all of this appeals court's 17 judges or to the U.S. Supreme Court. One of the authors of the state law, Republican Representative David Spiller of Jacksboro, was in the courtroom for the hearing, and we asked him if the state's lawyer made up any ground.
I think so, because, and I don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Sure.
You know, it's up to that 3-judge panel.
Right.
But previously, when we had a hearing a week or 2 before, the burden of proof on that was on the state of Texas. The burden of proof yesterday on the preliminary injunction is on the DOJ and the other plaintiff parties. So we have to keep that in mind. Burden of proof is a big thing in legal proceedings. And so, but I thought he did a good job. I thought he made the points that he needed to, and I feel good about where we are. What I've said all along is SB 4 is constitutional, and one of the reasons for that is we're not in conflict with existing federal law. And so it's drafted exactly like the existing federal law. There's not been yelling or screaming or protest for the last 70 years while the federal law has been in place, and this law has been enforced for illegal entry, illegal reentry, and a order to return for decades. And to say that basically, now that you have that, there's nothing unfair about that, asking someone to go back if they arrived here illegally. And under SB 4, on the front end, they only go back if they agree to go back. So I think that's a very fair process in lieu of further detention or prosecution. Now, on the back end, if they choose not to do that and say, we don't want to go back, but we want our case handled in this manner, then they're treated the same way as anyone else would that's charged with a crime in the United States, whether they be a citizen or a non-citizen. And they're entitled to their day in court, and if they're tried, and if they're convicted, and if they're sentenced, then at the end of that sentence, then yes, they are ordered back, and we go through the same process, where the judge determines the manner and means in which they are returned to the U.S. port of entry.
Is it a problem if that country, for example, Mexico, says, no, we're not recognizing this? You can't return. The state of Texas can't return.
Right. And I've heard what the president of Mexico and some in interior Mexico have said. I'm not too concerned about that. Number one, our governor has memorandums of understanding, MOUs, with the 4 states that border Texas, Mexican states. And we have a very good understanding with them. They have cooperated with us. We have the full belief that they're going to continue to cooperate with us in that respect to fight illegal immigration. And so if there's something additional that needs to be done, I have full faith and confidence in Governor Abbott to get that done. He has every right to do that under the U.S. Constitution, under our Constitution, to have MOUs with existing states. So I think that will happen. But the bigger issue is for Mexico to say that they're not going to take these people. I find to be very disingenuous, and that's a kind word to describe it, because they certainly let them in on the front end. They let them in at some other place in Mexico from countries, over 100 countries around the world, knowing full well what they're doing, where they're going. They participated in that. Mexico has. They facilitated it.
We also spoke with Democratic State Representative Ramon Romero of Fort Worth, who voted against SB 4.
In the Fifth Circuit, I hope that they're able to keep the stay in place at least, and we know it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and ultimately it'll get to the Supreme Court, and I hope that they've taken they will take the same position as the Arizona case, at which point that they will not necessarily condemn Texas, but remind Texas that this is a federal responsibility, and we cannot have a disorganized, combative environment between federal and state law officials. We just can't have that. We're not going to have law enforcement fighting other law enforcement for sake of visual aids for their political campaigns. It's a mess right now. I think we all acknowledge what's happening at the border needs to change. And I think that all the justices, whether it's from the lower courts or the Supreme Court, agree. But the method at which we're going to combat this issue is not going to be by having law enforcement or state fight federals.
So what do you think is the solution to what's going on at the border?
Well, look, I mean, I think that the numbers of asylum seekers is going to have to be cut down. I mean, there's no question. I think that as long as people know that there's a large number, that you have international law that supports you, they're going to keep coming. And look, I mean, I always have to remind people only come or only migrate for 2 reasons: they're hungry or they're scared. And as Americans, we have to decide, like, how many of these folks that are hungry or scared are we going to continue to let into our country, and how are we going to support them? And that's what I talked about earlier. It's like, if you're not sympathetic towards that need, okay, that's fine. Don't be sympathetic for that need. If you're not sympathetic for DACA, even though we used to be a little bit more, but the border has actually changed people's sentiment about DACA. We should have some sympathy for our own pocketbook, and that's not having a workforce that can keep up with this incredible growth that we're facing here in Texas is not a mathematical equation that makes sense. And as someone this is my 30th year in business, Jack, 30 years. And what I have to pay for a day laborer today, I have to pass on to every homeowner that I do business with. And I think homeowners are going to be really upset when they continue to see a higher appraisal, thus higher taxes for themselves, and at some point, an inability to stay in a home. So look, Texas has opportunities. Workforce authorizations, work permit authorizations is low-hanging fruit. We know we need skilled workers. These are not people that are just coming in here taking the lowest farm jobs. Some of them are, but a lot of them are skilled workers. We're talking about electricians, school teachers, stonemasons, people that can hang sheetrock and hang it well. And that's what I think all Texans all Americans are really going to agree on.
You attended a news conference, you spoke at a news conference
Yeah.
where you urged President Biden to increase the number of work authorizations.
I think we would like to see that happen, Jack. We would like to see some action taken today that's going to relieve some of the pressure on all of us Texans here that are facing an increase in cost.
And coming up, we go one-on-one with Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth about border security, help for Ukraine, and the Israel-Hamas war. Eye on Politics. We'll be back in a moment.
It can get pretty hot in North Texas in the summer, in the spring, during second spring, during second summer. So the city of Dallas is searching for ways to cool things down. The city released the results of an urban heat study that recorded temperatures and humidity in different areas. The study found there's an 8 to 10 degree temperature variation from one part of the city to another. Some of the hottest neighborhoods are Uptown, Oaklawn, Deep Ellum, and Bishop Arts. Part of the solution requires planting more trees, constructing parks, and using reflective surfaces. The city and Dallas ISD have already transformed more than 30 school campuses with outdoor learning areas and lots more trees. The Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability plans to map the remainder of the city in summer 2024.
Now we go one-on-one with Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth. We asked him about two wars going on. One Russia started against Ukraine and the other Hamas began against Israel. But first he told us he hopes the Texas immigration law will be rejected by the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
You never know with the Fifth Circuit. Obviously, you know, as someone that is a Democrat, I haven't been happy with a lot of the rulings that have come out of the Fifth Circuit, but I think that this particular law clearly violates a lot of the Constitution, and so I hope that it's found to be unconstitutional. Look, we need to be focused on common sense immigration reform, and we need our state to be focused on that.
What is your position on the bipartisan bill that was developed in the Senate on border security that ultimately was rejected? Is that something you would support it if it ever got to the House?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bipartisan bill that was rejected by Speaker Mike Johnson and rejected by Donald Trump, that was largely led by a senator from Oklahoma, one of the reddest states in this country, a senator that has a A+ on his Club for Growth report card. And instead of accepting that bill so we could do something about a lot of the disorder that we see at the border, Trump said, let's kill the bill, because if we kill the bill, it will hurt Biden. And I think that is that sort of spirit that people are sick of when they think of Washington, D.C.
As far as Ukraine and support for Ukraine, do you think there is going to be a bill in the House that will address that?
Look, if you look at what the Ukrainian military is doing right now, what the citizens of that country are doing together to band against Russia's unlawful invasion of that country, I think that is absolutely amazing. They're using the very bare minimums, makeshift drones, all other sorts of devices to help push back this unlawful Russian invasion. And they're actually doing pretty well. Putin is very upset. He is frustrated with his lack of advancement there in that country. And I think that any money that we can send Ukraine, that's a small price to pay in order to keep Europe and keep democracies across the world flourishing, and to send a message to other democracies that we're serious when it comes to protecting democracies. And I'll tell you this, I do think that there are enough votes to pass this, but again, because of the reckless radical Republicans that now seem to control the Speaker of the House, that seem to control our immigration policies in this country, because they don't want him to pass a bill to help the Ukrainians, then we don't have a bill on the floor. And so that's the only reason why we don't have one on the floor. It's because he cannot get the bill through.
On Israel,
Yes.
there have been increasing number of calls for an immediate ceasefire. Do you support that?
I do not support an immediate ceasefire. No, I do not at all. I think that it would be a mistake to support an immediate ceasefire, and you would be handing Hamas a victory. And by handing Hamas a victory, you would be encouraging radicalism around the world by doing that. And that is not something that anyone wants. People need to be able to travel to the Middle East and travel to other parts of this country by plane, or other countries around the world by plane, be able to move around those countries without fear of violence or other terroristic activities, and by just saying that we're just going to do a ceasefire while hostages are still there, would be sending the absolute wrong message. And no matter how much people think they want that, the aftermath of that would be something that we would all pay for, and it would make the world a much more dangerous place. And so do I think that what's happening in Gaza right now is awful? I absolutely do. No food, lack of water, people being killed. Absolutely, war is terrible, and the act of war that happened on October the 7th that has led to everything that is happening today has been bad for both Israel and the Palestinians.
And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening at CBS News Texas. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next week. And from all of us here, have a great rest of your weekend.